Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to my DevCon session here for the Introduction to Development for Zebra Android Devices. So thanks very much for tuning in. My name is James Swinton Bland. I'm the developer advocate for EMEA here at Zebra Technologies. I've been with Zebra for just about 3 years. Just quickly, briefly about myself. As a developer advocate, I sort of have a 50-50 role. From a technical aspect, I'm an Android developer and I do a lot of internal and external development, proof of concepts, demos, utilities, things like that. And then on the other side of my job is the advocacy, both internally and externally, for our developers, trying to make their lives a little bit easier and to support them with content like this today. So today's session is going to cover off sort of the following agenda. So the first 3 bullet points you see there are the first half of the session, where I'm just going to be going through some PowerPoint slides for about 15 minutes. And then the second half of the session, or the last 15 minutes, we're going to go through a live coding walkthrough. So we'll jump out of PowerPoint and we'll do sort of a live demo where we have a look at the code that's being triggered in the background. So the first thing I want to discuss today is sort of just a quick overview of our portfolio, just at a really high level, just to show you sort of the breadth and scope of what it is that we sell here at Zebra. And then we'll start getting straight into the interesting parts where we discuss the different scanning options. So as you can see there, we have something called the EMDK, and we also have something called DataWedge. So 2 different options for developers to use when they want to integrate scanning. Today, we feel it's best practice and encouraged to use DataWedge, so that's what we'll be focusing on. We'll go through in some detail what it is, how it works, how we configure it, and then of course, most importantly, how do we receive that scan data. So hopefully we'll give you a good understanding of what it is that needs to be done and how things work in the PowerPoint, and then we'll put it all into context with a bit of a live demo. So on this slide here, we have sort of an overview of our portfolio. It's not an extensive list. There's going to be some things that I've omitted here, but I just want to give you sort of a feel for all of the different products that we offer and all the different form factors that we support. So we have some warehousing devices there in the top left, the handheld computers with the keyboard and handle. Similarly, we have our mobile computers, which are more generic mobile devices, but ruggedized for industry. Then we have our tablets, our vehicle computers, and our kiosks, as well as some of our maybe less common devices like our wearable computers and our personal shoppers. The reason for showing you all these devices is because I just want to make it clear that essentially, even though all these devices have completely different form factors, all of the software running there is Android. It's pure Android with some Zebra value adds. And the scanning is available through all of these devices, and it's consistent across all the different hardware. So if you write an app for scanning on a kiosk, for example, it's going to be transferable to a mobile computer. The SDKs are sort of compliant across all the different hardware options that we have. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there's sort of 2 options that we have when deciding how to integrate scanning into our application. On the left-hand side there, we have something called the EMDK. So EMDK stands for Enterprise Mobility Development Kit. And what it is essentially a Java and Xamarin SDK, which provides access to extended capabilities of our devices. And one of those capabilities is the device scanner. So the EMDK is sort of a standard, as you would expect, SDK. You import the jar file into your application, gives you access to all of our APIs, and those APIs let you control lots of different things on the device, including the scanner. So it's a very traditional way of approaching things. DataWedge, on the other hand, is a system service which manages and exposes access to the device scanner. So rather than an SDK, this is an application that runs as a service on all of our devices that support scanning. And that service manages the scanner for you, and you would interact with DataWedge as sort of a middleware or a wedge. So let's take a closer look then at DataWedge, what it is and how it works. So in terms of an overview, it's a persistent background service, as I've just mentioned. So that means that it runs 24/7 on all of our devices. The device is turned on, the DataWedge service is going to be running in the background. Because it's a system app, it's signed by the OEM, ourselves, in the background and so on. It acts, as the name suggests, as a wedge between the scanner on the device. So that could be the imager, or it could be the camera, or it could be a peripheral like a Bluetooth scanner. So it acts as a wedge between those and the applications that sit on the device. It has support for other input types aside from scanning and barcodes, but today we're only going to focus on scanning. So in terms of configuration, we essentially have two options when we want to use DataWedge in our applications. We can either configure it manually using the application UI that's on the device, and that's what you can see in the screenshot on the left there, or we can configure it programmatically using the Android Intent API. So we'll talk a little bit more about the different intent APIs we have and how they work in the coming slides. But before we do that, I just want to sort of step through the overall architecture. So on the left-hand side, that screenshot that you see there is sort of the landing page when you open up the DataWedge application. What you see is a list of different profiles. So the way DataWedge works is it's profile-based. So essentially, depending on which activity is currently in the foreground, DataWedge will apply the profile associated with that activity, and as such, apply the configurations within that profile to the scanner. So let me break that down a little bit. Imagine I have an app called Application A, where I'd like to scan QR codes, and an Application B, where I want to scan EAN codes. What I would do in DataWedge is I would create two new profiles. One of them would be for Application A and one for Application B. And then I would go into those profiles and I would configure it so that the profile is associated with the relevant activity. Then on my device, when I swap between those two different applications or activities, then the configuration and the profile is changed in DataWedge. So DataWedge automatically handles swapping between an app that should support QR codes and an app that should support EAN codes. So this essentially removes all the complexity in terms of managing the scanner between different applications and activities. If we take a step into a profile, so in this case, if I tap on DataWedge demo, then it opens up all of the settings for that current profile. So you can see there at the top, we have whether or not the profile should be enabled, and then we have the associated apps button. So that's where I would tap in there and I would click and select my activity inside my application to associate it with this profile. So bear in mind, because the profile becomes active when the application or activity is in the foreground, that means that only one application can be associated with a profile. So if I have an app, it can only have one corresponding profile. In terms of configuration, the configuration is plugin based. So essentially each category of functionality has its own plugin. So if I move to the next screenshot here, you can see the configuration options for what's called the barcode input plugin. So you can see there we can enable or disable the plugin, and then we can go ahead and configure all the relevant settings for that plugin. So in this case, it might be the scanner selection or which symbologies the barcode input should support. If I flick through here, we also have the configuration for receiving data. So as I mentioned, in terms of communication into DataWedge, that's all done through intents if you want to do it programmatically. When you want to receive the data out from DataWedge, so when a scan is performed and you want to consume that in your application, you have three different options. The DataWedge can output it directly to the keyboard queue. So if you don't want to process the data in your application, you just want to send it to the current view that's in focus, then you would enable the keystroke output and essentially all scan data. So if I scan a barcode, it will push that string directly to the view that's currently in focus. What we're going to focus on today is the intent output. So this essentially tells DataWedge when you perform a scan and you've got the scan data there ready for me, then send it to my application via an intent. So you can see on the left-hand side there, you have to configure the action string, the category, and how you would like that intent to be delivered. So you can have it as a broadcast, you can tell DataWedge to start an activity, or you can tell DataWedge to start a service for you. In this case, we're going to use broadcasting, but we'll talk more about that towards the end. One last thing to mention in terms of receiving data is that DataWedge has the ability to do some pre or post processing of the data before it sends it to you. So if you have some trailing white space in your barcode, for example, and you'd like DataWedge to trim that, you can configure it to do that, and it will tidy up your data before it sends it to you. So now let's take a sort of a closer look at how the intents work. So as I mentioned, all communication to and from DataWedge is via intents. So intents are a standard Android mechanism, and we have lots of different APIs performing different actions based on what intent is sent. So we're going to be focusing on creating a profile, configuring it, and then performing a scan by sending intents. These intents that we send to DataWedge and that we receive from DataWedge, they can contain what's called extra data, and that relates to the action that they're trying to achieve. So if I send an intent telling DataWedge to create a profile, then I need to include a little bit of extra information in there to tell DataWedge what I would like to call that profile. And that's an example of our extra data. So when we create the profile, that's a very simple API to use. If we're trying to configure the barcode settings, for example, that can be a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of settings that can be changed for our barcode scanners. So we use a concept called nested bundles to try and organize this within the intent API structure. So let's look at an example. So if we're going to use the setConfig API, which is what we use to configure the actual profile inside DataWedge, then we need to provide DataWedge with all the information required to set that configuration. It needs to know what we would like the configuration to be. So as I mentioned, we use nested bundles. There's sort of 3 levels to these bundles. The first bundle that you have, the sort of top level bundle, is called the main bundle. And this is where you put information about the profile. Then you have your plugin config bundle, where you tell DataWedge what plugin you're trying to configure. And then inside that bundle, you have something called the param list, which contains all the configurations for that specific plugin. Because we have more than one plugin, you can repeat the plugin config and have multiple plugin config bundles inside your main bundle. So the idea of this is using bundles allows complex configurations to be created in a comprehensible and maintainable way. So let me put this in a little bit more context. So on the left-hand side, we have sort of like an overall view of how these bundles sort of nest together. And on the right-hand side, we have the corresponding code. So we have on the right-hand side, a bundle being created called main bundle. And inside that bundle, we put the top level information. So which profile we would like to configure, whether it should be enabled or not, and what configuration mode to use. So should we create a new one if it doesn't exist, or should we update it if it already exists, and so on. Once we've created that bundle, we can go ahead and create the next level of the bundle, which is the plugin config bundle. So here we create a new bundle and we put in some information here saying which plugin we would like to target. In this case, it's going to be the barcode plugin, and how we would like to configure that plugin. So in this case, we're going to reset the config to its default and then apply all of the values that we put in our next bundle, which is the param list bundle. So in here, we have all of the different settings and options for this particular plugin. In this case, it's the barcode plugin. And you can see there that we're setting different symbologies, so code 128 and QR code, for example, to be enabled. And we would like the input plugin, the barcode input plugin itself to be enabled. So if we were to put this all together, this is what it would look like. So we create a main bundle where we target the actual profile. We create the plugin bundle where we target the particular plugin. We create the param list bundle where we give all of the different variables for that plugin, and then we nest them inside each other, attach them to an intent, and send that on to DataWedge. So hopefully that makes at least a little bit of sense to you. And we're just going to quickly recap what we've gone through so far. So DataWedge is a persistent background service which controls the scanner on the device. It's profile-based, so the current foreground activity determines which configuration is currently applied. So bear in mind, a profile can be associated with multiple apps, but an app can only be associated with one profile. DataWedge can be configured manually or programmatically, and if we're doing it programmatically, we do it via the intent API. And when we use the intent API to configure a profile, we use nested bundles to provide the configuration parameters for each plugin. So that's about the first 15 minutes or so of this session covered off, and that's the presentation side of things finished. So let me hop straight on over here into my source code and bring up the mobile device. So what you can see here on the right-hand side is a class I've created called DataWedge Utilities. This essentially contains all of the code that we need to set up a profile inside DataWedge, associate it to our application, configure it with some certain configurations, and then receive scan data. So over here in DataWedge, this is the landing page of the DataWedge application that we saw in the screenshots earlier, and we have our different profiles. So if I click on the default profile, for example, we can see all of these different options. Here's our barcode input plugin, our voice input, which we've skipped over today, our keystroke output, and all the different options associated there, and the intent output. So you can see there's quite a number of different settings to apply. If I was to choose a different non-default profile, you can also see the associated apps with this profile. So essentially what this means is if any of these applications come to the foreground, so the launcher application, for example, then this profile and all of the configurations contained within it will be applied. Similarly, if we were to go on DataWedge demo and see the associated apps, when this demo activity is in the foreground, then this profile configuration is applied. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new profile. We're going to add it in here. We're going to associate that profile with our application. We're going to do some configuration to it, and then we're going to receive some scan data. So here's the application that I created earlier, and hopefully this is still attached in debug mode. And the first thing that I need to do, as we can see here, is to create the profile so it's ready to be associated. So when I create a profile, I only need to provide one piece of information to DataWedge, and that's the name of the profile. So let me call this DevCon demo. And when I hit this create profile button, this is the code that's going to be executed here, this create profile method. So I hit create profile. Luckily, the debugger is still attached. First thing I'm going to do is just save the profile name for later, because we're going to have to refer to that when we want to do further configuration to the profile. And then I need to create the intent to send to DataWedge. So I create this intent, and this has its standard action string that's basically telling DataWedge, when you receive this intent, I would like you to do something with it. Then I add this extra value to the intent where I say, this is what I would like you to do. I would like you to create a profile for me. Please use this profile name here to create this profile. So in this case, it's going to be DevCon demo, as you can see. This next little section here is optional. But if we add these two extras to the intent called send result and command identifier, then we're basically saying to DataWedge, when you've processed this intent command, let me know by sending an intent back to me how that went. Was it successful or did it fail? So if I hit play now, you can see there that the intent has been built here. And I know you can't see what's necessarily in this bundle, but that's all of the information that we have just created. And then when I press play again, it's going to send this intent to DataWedge, and it's going to send an intent back. So what I've done is I've pre-configured a broadcast receiver to consume that intent response. What we should hopefully see now is that this jumps to our handle DataWedge result method, which has the intent from DataWedge with the result of the action that we just did. So if I call get string extra on that intent with result as the name of the extra, that gives us the result of the operation. So in this case, it was a success. So in here, I'm just checking if it equals success, then let's return true, which it did. So if I press play, I'm just going to untab that one. If I press play now and navigate back into the application, we can see that the next part of the app has been enabled. So the second stage now, in fact, just before we do that, I will open up DataWedge so that you can see that the DevCon demo profile has now been created. So that's just by sending an intent, it's created this profile and it's created it with all these default values for us. If I click into associated apps, nothing is associated. So essentially this profile won't function because it will never become active because it isn't associated with any apps. So that's what I need to do next. So I do that by going back into my app, and I'm going to hit this associate profile with app button, and that's going to call this method here. So let me go ahead and do that. Again, the first thing that we need to do is create the intent with this action that basically just says to DataWedge, I would like to do something, please. And then we need to create our nested bundle structure. So this is sort of a first glimpse at how we would nest bundles within other bundles in order to perform the configuration. So here is the first step. We create our main top level bundle, the header of the intent, essentially. You can think of it that way. And we provide the profile name. So we're saying to DataWedge, this is the profile we'd like to modify. We'd like to keep it enabled, and we would like to update it, please. You can see there we have different options: create if not exist, overwrite, or update. In this case, we will go with update. Once we've created that main bundle, we can create our next bundle, which is the app config bundle. So inside here, we provide DataWedge with a package name of the application we would like to associate with this profile. So in this case, it's just the package name of this app. And then we put in a string array of the activities inside this application that we would like to associate with this profile. So when I said before we could have application A and application B have two separate profiles, we can take that one step further, and we can actually say activity A and activity B inside one application should have different configurations. And we would do that by listing different activities in here based on the profile. For simplicity's sake, I'm just using the wildcard star character. So essentially this means any activity inside this application should be associated with this profile. Anytime any of these activities come to the foreground, then apply this current configuration. Then it's just a case of taking these bundles and nesting them into each other. So we take the main bundle and we place the app config bundle inside there, with the app list key. And then we take the top level intent that we created and put the main bundle inside there with the set config action. So by doing this, we're essentially saying when I send this intent to DataWedge, I would like to set the config of the profile contained within here and use all of the configurations that are inside this main bundle. We put in this last little extra bit that tells DataWedge we'd like to receive the response, and then we send the broadcast to DataWedge. So if I hit play again, after now, it should give us our response, which it has. In this case, it was successful for our associate app command. So if I hit play again, and I navigate back into our application, you can see there that it's progressed to the next stage. So if I open up DataWedge again, and I have a look at my associated apps, let me just make sure that refreshes. We can see there now that my application has been associated with this profile. So essentially this means whenever my activity comes into the foreground, this profile and all of the configurations here within will be applied. So what do I need to do next? Well, I need to configure DataWedge so that it knows how to send its data to me. What we're doing in the interest of time is I'm skipping over the barcode input configuration, just because the standard default settings are applicable for us in the demo, and it's pretty much the same process as what I'm about to show you for the intent output, but as it would be for the barcode output. So we're just going to use the default values for the barcode input plugin, and what we're going to configure is the intent output plugin down here. So we're going to make this enabled. We're going to provide an action name for the intent that we would like DataWedge to send us when a scan occurs. And we're going to set the delivery method to broadcast intent. We're going to do that all through the intent APIs. So I'll click back into my demo here. These are the two values that I'm going to apply. So I'm going to give it an intent action of com.zebra.datawedgebasicdemo.scan. And then I'm going to set the delivery mode to 2, which happens to be broadcast. You can change this first value to anything you like. It's just necessary to set this so that you can register a receiver in your application that will catch these scan broadcast intents. So I am going to hit configure intent output, and it's going to launch this method here. And there's going to be lots of similarities with what we just did. So the first thing we do is we create the intent with the DataWedge action saying, I would like to do something, please. We create our main bundle that tells us which profile we would like to target, and that's our DevCon demo profile. And then we create our intent config plugin bundle. So this is sort of the header for the plugin. We say we'd like to target the intent plugin, please, and we would like to reset all of those configurations. Then we create our intent properties bundle, which actually tells DataWedge what we would like the settings to be. So we'd like to enable this plugin. We'd like to set the intent action to the value that we've just seen, and we would like to give the intent delivery mechanism as a 2, which in this case represents a broadcast. Then it's a case of just taking all of those bundles, nesting them within each other, and then sending the intent. So we place the intent properties bundle inside the intent config. We place the intent config inside the main bundle, and then we add the main bundle to our initial intent with the set config API here. Finally, as always, we add the results, and then we send the broadcast. So let me press play on both of those. And now if I go back into, oh, well, we can see that it was successful there as well as we would expect. And I can go back into my demo. And now we can see that DataWedge is configured and I'm ready to start performing and receiving scan data. So if I go back into DataWedge and refresh this and scroll back down to the intent output. So before this was blank, and now we can see there that the intent action is scan and the intent delivery is broadcast intent. So essentially, when this app comes into the foreground, this profile is applied. And then whenever DataWedge performs a scan, it's going to broadcast that scan data out with this intent action that we can consume in our app, and then we can handle that scan data. So if I come back out and I go into DataWedge, I could just use the hardware buttons on the device to perform this scan, but that would be boring. So what I'm going to do is hit this scan button down here. This is going to build an intent to send to DataWedge to say start scanning, please. So if I hit there, you can see there that we create an intent, we use the action API, and we add this extra called soft scan trigger, start scanning. So essentially saying to DataWedge, when you receive this intent, please turn the scan beam on for me. There's something I would like to scan. We hit play twice there, and then we can see that well, you can't see, but I can, that the scanner is now active. And then if I just tap that one more time, because I let the scanner go out and come back in here, I can scan that barcode. Now that that barcode has been scanned, what it's done is it's broadcasted an intent through the Android OS, and I've already registered a broadcast receiver in my app to consume that intent, and that is the scan intent here. So now that I have the scan intent inside of my application, and you can see there that its action is com.zebra.datawedgebasicdemo.scan as we asked it to be, we can then pull the data out from that intent. So we can get the actual barcode data, we can get the symbology and the source. In this case, I'm just returning a wrapper object called scan that I've created with that information so that I can process and display it in the application. So if I hit play twice there and then open the application back up, we can see that the scan data has been received. That's the barcode value. It's an EAN8 and it came directly from the scanner. I can rinse and repeat that. I'm sure you'll hear the scan tone. And we can see there that it receives the scan once more and then subsequently updates that in our application. If I remove my debugging, just so we can see this happening sort of in real time, you can see scan and data is received essentially instantaneously, at least as far as my human eye can tell. So we've been through quite a few different steps there. We have created a new profile. We have associated that profile with our activity and our application. And then we've told that profile how we would like to receive the scan data, and then we've received and processed that scan data. That's all within this DataWedge utilities class, which I can provide to you if you would like. So just to finish off, I can go back into my presentation here, and if I click again, we can go to the questions page. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. So thanks very much, everybody, for your time and attendance. You can use the mechanisms that are available here to ask any questions that haven't been answered already, and we'll be sure to get back to you with any responses. So please feel free to either reach out directly or leave your questions below. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of DevCon.